Am I the asshole for requesting my son and nephew be placed in separate classrooms next grade? My son and my nephew are both 6 years old and were placed in the same class at the start of this year. My sister has loved it for my nephew. He's autistic and has a lot of trouble socializing and with overstimulation. He's known to have meltdowns in class. And there were times my son was asked to stay with him while the class was evacuated. I had to step in and speak to the teacher, as well as the principal, about this because my son was terrified. They were seat friends all year, and they are the only two kids who never got a new seat friend. The teacher kept them together because she was worried my nephew would be bullied by other kids. But it was hard for my son. He's very shy and introverted, and sometimes my nephew getting upset would upset him. My son was also used to supply my nephew with pencils and other tools when my nephew would break them. My sister was so happy they were together. My son was miserable, and I hated seeing him that way. My sister went to the school a month ago and requested they be kept together next grade. She mentioned it in passing during a family barbecue. I asked her why she did this, and she told me it's working great for my nephew. I told her it wasn't working out great for my son. And while I love my nephew, I don't want my son to feel like he always has to be responsible for his cousin. She told me I should think of the greater good and encourage them to stay together. I went to the school afterward and requested the boys be placed in separate classrooms next grade. I told them my son did not deserve to have his education interrupted in order to help my nephew. I made it clear I was not okay with keeping them together. I also brought up again that I had not liked how they had handled things over the last year. The school agreed to separate them. We got notified of the classrooms and teachers last week. My sister was furious when she realized they were separated. She asked how I could do that to my nephew. I should think of the impact this will have on him. I told her I love my nephew, always have, but I need to look out for my son. She told me it will never be as bad for my son as it will be for my nephew, and we could have figured out a way to make it work better for both boys. Am I the asshole? We could have figured out a way to make it work better for both boys. But you weren't interested in making it work better for my son. You decided that your son's needs were the greater good, and therefore my son should sacrifice his education. That is not acceptable, and BTW, it's not like this was a reasonable long-term strategy for your son either. All you were doing was masking his problems and making him dependent on another little boy who has his own needs. Not the asshole. I'm glad you spoke up for your son. I've sadly seen numerous posts here before where a healthy child's needs get sacrificed in a futile attempt to help another child with significant needs. Not only do parents sometimes go along with this in the name of family harmony, they often do it in such a way that both children are harmed. Good on you for calling out the school on the mistakes they've already made. Hopefully, they will put policies in place, e.g., require all kids to rotate their seat friends. That will protect the next child. That is so important going forward. Not rotating every child with a seat friend means some kids are getting no chance to make friends. And that comes with a set of problems, not always the easiest to identify to everyone, but can be seen by those closest to us. They really f***ed up this year, and my son did not get the education he deserved. But I'll keep fighting as much as I need to for it. 1000% not the asshole. This is obviously something that requires approval and consent from both FA mother-in-law IES. She cannot unilaterally request something like that, which you are against, and expect it to be honored. In fact, it sounds like the school did your son a major disservice this year, and it's a relief that they are willing to give him space from his cousin. She will have to get over it. This isn't for the greater good. It's for her son specifically, and it's sad and tone-deaf that she's so comfortable letting another kid shoulder the full weight of the extra support and socialization her son needs, to the detriment of that kid, your child, being her nephew. She should also care about the both of them being okay. I suspect she is somewhat desperate for a normal school experience for her son, which might feel out of reach, but your son is not responsible for being the solution to that problem. I'm autistic, and your sister is showing signs a lot of non-autistic parents of autistic kids show, that of deciding that since their kid is more than they were planning on, they deserve to have everyone else step in and handle the extra for them. I absolutely sympathize with the autistic child, but if that kid is bad enough off, they have to evacuate the classroom because he melts down. And your son is required to stay with him, which is both completely unfair and dangerous for your son. Your nephew should be in a situation where his needs can be accommodated better than is ever going to happen in a public school. For one thing, autistic kids who melt down don't do so randomly. They do so when they are in sensory agony, when they are highly distressed, and for other causes which can be managed to some degree at least, if the adults around him care to even try. The whole situation is unfair to your nephew. It's really unfair to your son, who at 6 years old should not have to become the caretaker of an autistic child. And your sister is being selfish as hell in all respects. If you confront her about this, she will doubtless start hollering about how hard it is to be her son's mother, and how mean you're being, and why is it so hard to ask your son to caretake his age mate at 6 years old? It's not much to ask, blah blah blah. I know the type. I've heard it quite a few times. She knew perfectly well that anyone at any time can have a special needs child. You don't have to be in a high-risk group. You don't have to mess up during the pregnancy. You don't have to expose the kid to anything dangerous after birth. It just happens when it happens. These people act like they were guaranteed the exact child they envisioned. They were cheated, and now the world owes it to them to relieve them of the burden. Not the asshole. Well, that's another episode of Am I the Asshole in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.